10 Beatles songs, bigger hits, different artists, and in at least one case, the man who wrote the song was secretly playing guitar on the cover nobody knew about. You already know the Fab Four, the catalog, the mythology, the records that'll never be broken. But what you might not know is how many of their songs they didn't bother releasing as singles, songs Lennon laughed off, songs McCartney wrote at 16 and thought were too embarrassing to record, became massive, chart-topping moments for somebody else. This isn't about inferior versions. In several of these cases, the cover hit harder, went higher, and became what people think of first when they hear the title. This is the Shadow catalog, the other side of the Beatles story. Let's get into it. Number 10, Sergio Mendes in Brazil, 66, The Fool on the Hill. Nobody ever hears him on the sides he appears to me. Let me start here because if you think you know this song as a Beatles track, you might be wrong about where you first heard it. The Fool on the Hill came from Magical Mystery Tour, 1967. In his head, see the world. Paul McCartney wrote it about a solitary visionary. Some people say it's about the Maharishi. Some say it's just what it feels like to see the world clearly while everyone around you thinks you're losing it. Either way, a beautiful melody. Never released as a US or UK single by the Beatles. It just lived on the album and collected dust on the airwaves. Then Sergio Mendes found it. Mendes, the Brazilian pianist who'd already turned bossa nova into an American household sound, recorded it in 1968 with Brazil 66. They can see that he's just a fool, and he never gives it. He didn't try to replicate it. He gave it to two female vocalists singing in close harmony over a breezy Latin arrangement that made the whole thing feel like a slow afternoon somewhere warm. Something about that combination, those voices, that tempo, made the song float in a way even McCartney hadn't imagined. It hit number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the summer of 1968, and it topped Billboard's easy listening chart for 6 straight weeks. The Beatles version, it charted nowhere because it was never released as a single. If you've ever been in a restaurant or a hotel lobby in the late 60s or early 70s and heard a gentle, gorgeous version of this song drifting through the room, that was Sergio Mendes, not the Beatles. One detail to keep in your back pocket. Paul McCartney filmed his segment of Magical Mystery Tour, the visual that goes with this song, secretly near Nice in France without telling the other 3 Beatles. He just flew out there with a cameraman and shot it. Nobody else knew, which tells you something about where things were already heading between them. They can tell what he wants to do, and he never shows his... Number 9, Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas, Bad to Me.
Don't you ever leave me.
Here's a question. Can you name a John Lennon composition that hit number 1 in the UK and that Lennon himself knocked off the charts with his very next song? The answer is Bad to Me. And the story behind it is one of the stranger chapters in early Beatles history. April 1963. John Lennon is in Barcelona, Spain, on holiday with Brian Epstein, just the two of them.
They'll be glad you're not back.
Lennon talked about this trip later in a way that was candid even for him. He said it was almost a love affair, but not quite, that Epstein had admitted he was gay, and that Lennon, whose wife Cynthia was back home pregnant with their first child, found the whole experience more fascinating than uncomfortable.
You let me go, you won't be bad to me.
He said he was thinking like a writer the whole time. And while Epstein was out one night, Lennon sat down and wrote a song, not for himself, for Billy J. Kramer, another act on Epstein's roster, a young Liverpool singer who'd just gotten a recording deal and needed a hit.
Cause you told me so, and I've no.
Now stay with me on this because the infrastructure around this record is almost absurd. Kramer was managed by Brian Epstein, produced by George Martin, recorded at Abbey Road. And the J in Billy J. Kramer, John Lennon suggested he added, said it gave the name a tougher edge. This man was entirely surrounded by Beatles architecture. He just didn't have the song.
Get back to me.
Bad to Me went to #1 in the UK in August 1963, and then Lennon knocked it off the top spot himself with She Loves You. He wrote a #1, then replaced it with another #1. The Beatles never officially recorded the original.
But I've got my one and only, they'll be glad you're not.
When the single was released in the US the following year, it hit #9 on the Billboard Hot 100, one of the first Lennon and McCartney compositions to crack the American charts performed by someone other than the Beatles. Most people have never heard of it.
And I've no intention of letting you go. Just
Let's look at the numbers. Only 9% of you are actually subscribed. Honestly, that's tough to see. Our team spends days hunting down archives and verifying every single fact just to tell these stories right. If you've made it this far into the video, you're clearly part of the community, so please hit subscribe. It costs nothing and helps us immensely. Now, for those already subscribed, very few of you have made the jump to our membership, and that's a hard pill to swallow because you're the ones who know our value best. If this channel has moved you or inspired you, consider joining. It's the price of one coffee, but it's the literal fuel for this channel. Let's keep this alive together. Back to the story.
#8, the Overlanders, Michelle. In January 1966, a folk pop group from Britain that most people have completely forgotten about had the #1 record in the UK. The song went on to win the Grammy for Song of the Year in 1967, and the Beatles hadn't released it as a UK single.
and I will say the only words I know that
Michelle came out on Rubber Soul in December 1965. McCartney had written the melody years earlier. It started as a party piece, a farcical imitation of French cafe music he'd play to get a laugh at art school parties.
these are words that go together well.
John Lennon told him to finish it properly. He did. And the moment Rubber Soul dropped, every label in Britain scrambled to cover it because the Beatles weren't releasing Michelle as a UK single. So the song was just sitting there. The Overlanders were doing a cabaret residency in Bradford when their manager called. There's a song on the new Beatles album, recorded immediately. They rehearsed it backstage, booked a studio for one day, recorded it on a Sunday. That same night, they got on a ferry to Germany for a 2-week run at a Frankfurt club. They came back January 1st, 1966. Michelle was already getting rave reviews. It hit #1, and the Overlanders' original drummer said it directly years later. They are, in his words, the only band to successfully outsell an original Beatles version released as a single throughout most of the world. Meanwhile, George Martin, the Beatles' own producer, had also recorded a Michelle cover with a duo called David and Jonathan. His version didn't win the UK chart battle, but it went to #1 in Canada. The Overlanders never had another hit. Michelle won Song of the Year at the Grammys. And if you've ever wondered why the Grammy went to Lennon and McCartney instead of to a band who actually charted with it, well, that's how publishing works. #7, Earth, Wind and Fire, Got to Get You Into My Life.
Got to get you into my.
This one has a secret Paul McCartney hasn't always wanted to discuss openly. Got to Get You Into My Life appeared on Revolver in 1966, Infectious Horn Arrangement, Irresistible Groove. Sounds like a love song. Most people assumed it was a love song. Then McCartney admitted it plainly years later. It's actually an ode to pot.
Got to get you into my life, into my life.
He just discovered marijuana. The song is about his first real relationship with cannabis. John Lennon thought it was some of McCartney's best work, and the Beatles never released it as a U.S. single. It sat on Revolver, D, which, depending on who you ask, is the greatest album they ever made and wasn't issued stateside as a single until 1976, 6 years after the band broke up. By then, Earth, Wind and Fire had already made it their own. Their version came out of the 1978 Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band movie, which was, by most accounts, one of the most catastrophic films of that decade. The Bee Gees, Peter Frampton, Steve Martin, a critical disaster, millions of unsold albums returned to the label, reputations damaged. The whole thing is remembered as a cautionary tale. But Earth, Wind and Fire's Got to Get You Into My Life, it left the movie behind and became something else entirely. It hit number 1 on the R&B chart, number 9 on the Hot 100, won a Grammy for Best Instrumental Arrangement, Accompanying Vocalist. And here's something most people don't know. Back in 1966, a musician named Walter Paraziter heard the original Beatles recording of this song on Revolver. The horn arrangement hit him so hard that he decided to build an entire band around the combination of rock and brass. That band became the Chicago Transit Authority. Then just Chicago, one of the biggest selling acts of the entire 1970s. And it started because a kid heard this specific Beatles track and couldn't get it out of his head. Some of y'all already knew about EWF's version. I doubt you knew about Chicago. Number 6, Marmalade, Obladi, Oblada. Before I get into who made this song a hit, I need you to understand one thing. The Beatles spent 42 hours recording Obladi Oblada. 42 hours. That's more than 4 times the length of their entire debut album recording sessions. McCartney was obsessed. He'd restart takes he'd already approved. He'd build new arrangements from scratch. He kept his bandmates playing the same reggae-influenced groove over and over until the room felt like a pressure cooker. And John Lennon, who reportedly called it Paul's granny music shit, finally snapped. He came into the studio one night completely out of his mind on something, sat down at the piano and smashed out the opening chords at twice the normal tempo. "This is it," he said. "See, come on." And everyone in the room stopped and listened. That was it. The most recognizable moment in the song came from Lennon in a state of chemically altered frustration. There's one more thing. Paul McCartney accidentally sang the wrong lyrics in the final take. Desmond stays at home and does his pretty face instead of Molly. And nobody caught it until the mix was done. It stayed in the record. Then the Beatles voted 3-1 against releasing it as a UK single. McCartney wanted it out. Harrison, Lennon, and Starr said no. It stayed on the White Album. And Marmalade, a Scottish pop group from Glasgow, rush recorded their version during a week of cabaret shows in the northeast of England and released it before the year was out. It hit number 1 in the UK in January 1969, sold 500,000 copies in Britain, and 1 million globally by April. Marmalade became the first Scottish act to ever top the UK singles chart because of a song 3 Beatles voted against releasing. The Marmalade lead singer has said this publicly, and I don't think he's wrong. Obladi Oblada is known more for being a Marmalade song than a Beatles track, and if you were around in Britain at the time, you probably can't argue with him. Number 5, Yesterday, the most covered song in history. Paul McCartney woke up one morning in 1965 with a complete melody in his head. No lyrics, just the tune. So fully formed, so immediate that his first reaction wasn't excitement, it was suspicion. You had to go. He thought he was remembering someone else's song. He spent weeks playing it for people, musicians, producers, friends. Have you heard this? Where's this from? Nobody recognized it. Eventually, George Martin told him, "Paul, you wrote it. It's yours." He called it Scrambled Eggs while he worked on the lyrics. The final version became Yesterday. The Beatles released it as a U.S. single in August 1965. It went to number 1. You probably know that. What you might not know is that the Beatles never released Yesterday as a UK single during their career in Britain, and it appeared on the Help album and a standalone EP. Nothing more. No UK single ever. Which meant anyone in Britain who wanted a chart single of Yesterday had to buy a cover. And they did. Matt Monro brought it into the UK charts as a single in 1965, while the Beatles had no chart position for it at home. Now I need a place to hide. And then it just kept going. Ray Charles recorded it. Marvin Gaye, Boyz II Men, Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra. The current count of recorded cover versions of Yesterday sits above 2,200. It is the most covered song in the history of recorded music, according to Guinness World Records. And here's the thing that still gets me. In multiple countries, on multiple charts, for multiple years, the Beatles had no chart position for Yesterday. None. While covers were climbing to the top. Oh, now I long for yesterday. Indeed, a song Paul McCartney thought was someone else's memory, that he called Scrambled Eggs for weeks, that the Beatles never even bothered to release as a UK single, is the most recorded composition in human history. That's a specific kind of irony that I don't think anyone ever fully wraps their head around. Now I need a place to hide. Number 4, Wilson Pickett. Hey Jude. Remember to let her in your heart. Nobody wanted to make this record. And then, when they did, it launched 2 careers, changed the sound of rock and roll, and made Eric Clapton pull over on the side of a highway. Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Don't make it bad. Late 1968. Wilson Pickett arrives at Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. He's one of the biggest names in soul music. He's there to record a new album. Problem? No song. A 21-year-old session guitarist suggests covering Hey Jude. The Beatles version had just spent 9 weeks at number 1 in America, still everywhere on the radio. Pickett's producer, Rick Hall, looked at the kid and said, "No, you don't compete with the biggest song in the world while it's still on the charts. You don't try to build a soul record around a 7-minute Beatles anthem. It makes no sense." The kid pushed. Hall said no again. Pickett said no. The kid's name was Duane Allman, Somehow, he convinced them. They recorded it on November 27, 1968. Pickett's voice found a rawness in the melody that even McCartney hadn't heard there. And then Allman took the coda, those familiar na-na-nas, and built something on top of it. A guitar solo that climbed and climbed until there was nothing left in the room but that sound. When Hall heard the playback, he immediately picked up the phone and called Atlantic Records executive Jerry Wexler, played him the tape. Wexler bought Allman's contract from Hall on the spot for $10,000.
You got to remember to let out your skin.
Then Eric Clapton heard the song on his car radio, pulled over, called Atlantic immediately. I need to know who that guitar player is now. That guitarist formed the Allman Brothers Band within the year. 2 years later, Clapton specifically requested him as the second guitarist on Layla and other assorted love songs. Jimmy Johnson, the rhythm guitarist on that session, has said it directly. Duane Allman's guitar solo on Wilson Pickett's Hey Jude was the beginning of Southern rock. One session, one cover nobody wanted to make, and if you've ever tried to explain why Muscle Shoals matters to someone who doesn't get it, who wasn't there, this is the story you play for them. Number 3, Peter and Gordon, A World Without Love.
And don't allow the day here in...
I want you to picture this. It's 1964. Paul McCartney, who is about to become the most successful songwriter in the history of popular music, has a song he cannot give away. He'd written it at 16, a slow, simple love ballad with an opening line that made John Lennon laugh every single time he heard it.
Where I hide with my loneliness.
Please lock me away. Lennon couldn't get through the first bar without cracking up. He refused to let the Beatles record it. The song sat in McCartney's drawer, unfinished, for years. McCartney tried to give it to Billy J. Kramer first. Kramer passed. Then Paul moved into the London home of his girlfriend, Jane Asher, and shared the top floor with Jane's brother, a 19-year-old named Peter Asher, who'd just formed a vocal duo with his schoolmate, Gordon Waller. They'd gotten a recording deal. They needed something to record.
Birds sing out of tune and rain clouds high.
Peter asked Paul if they could have the unfinished song. Paul said yes, but Peter had to hound him for weeks to get the bridge written. Asher recalled later, I had to nag him to write the bridge. It came just in time for the session.
With my loneliness, I don't care what.
A World Without Love was released in February 1964. It went to number 1 in the UK in April, knocking the Beatles' Can't Buy Me Love off the top spot. A McCartney composition displacing a McCartney composition. He knocked himself out of first place with a song his partner found ridiculous.
Where I hide with my loneliness.
2 months later, it hit number 1 in the United States. And I want you to sit with this for a second because it matters. Of every song Lennon and McCartney ever wrote, the thousands of compositions, now the hundreds of covers, only 2 Lennon-McCartney compositions have ever reached number 1 in the United States performed by someone other than the Beatles. 2.
So I wait, and in a while.
A World Without Love by Peter and Gordon in 1964. And the song we're about to talk about, Peter Asher went on to become one of the most important music executives in history, running Apple Records, managing James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt, producing albums that became generational touchstones. It all started because Paul McCartney needed somewhere to put a song that John Lennon couldn't hear without laughing. That's a beautiful, strange, specific kind of luck. Number 2, Joe Cocker, With a Little Help from My Friends.
I will try not to sing out of key.
The Beatles made a record. Then someone heard it and made it into something else entirely. And the Beatles, instead of being territorial about it, took out an ad in the music press to tell the world. With a Little Help from My Friends was written for Ringo Starr, specifically for Sgt. Pepper's. McCartney said later they wrote it as a little craft job, a warm, bouncy song built around Ringo's voice, written to feel effortless. It was never released as a UK single. It was the second track on the album. Nothing more. Then in 1968, Joe Cocker, a singer from Sheffield with a voice that sounded like gravel filtered through gospel, rewired it. He slowed it down, changed the rhythm entirely, and gave it a weight the original never had. He brought in Jimmy Page on guitar, B.J. Wilson of Procol Harum on drums, soul singers Madeline Bell and Sonny Wheatman on backing vocals. Producer Denny Cordell shaped the whole thing into something that breathed differently, lower, more weight-bearing, more desperate, in the best possible way. When the recording was done, Cocker and Cordell brought the tape directly to Paul McCartney. Paul listened, and he said later, "It was just mind-blowing, totally turned the song into a soul anthem. I was forever grateful to him for having done that." The Beatles sent Cocker a telegram of congratulations, and they placed an ad in the music press praising the cover. That almost never happened, so the Beatles publicly endorsing a cover of their own song, they were that moved by it. It hit number 1 in the UK in November 1968. Cocker performed it at Woodstock the following summer, soaked through, trembling with it, giving everything he had, and it became a generational anthem. In 1988, it became the opening theme for the Wonder Years. In 2001, it was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. Cocker died in 2014, and McCartney said it again, mind-blowing. I was forever grateful. You know that feeling when you hear a song you love and someone covers it so completely that you genuinely can't say which version is the original anymore? That's what Cocker did to this song, and the Beatles, the people who actually wrote it, felt the same way. Number 1, Elton John, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Answer quite slowly, a girl with collide.
And here we are, the only Beatles song to ever reach number 1 in the United States performed by someone other than the Beatles. Out of every song Lennon and McCartney ever wrote, out of every cover version ever recorded, one artist has taken a Beatles composition to the top of the Billboard Hot 100, just one, and that's Elton John.
Let's go by.
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds appeared on Sgt. Pepper's in 1967. No track from that album was ever released as a single. The Beatles' version charted nowhere, not because the world didn't want it, but because it was never given the chance. It lived on the record, untouched. In 1974, Elton John decided to record it. And here's what most people still don't know. He enlisted John Lennon to play guitar and sing backing vocals on the track. Lennon agreed to dowards, but he didn't want to be publicly credited, so he used a pseudonym, Dr. Winston O'Boogie. Winston was his actual middle name. The credit on the single read simply, featuring Dr. Winston O'Boogie.
With the sun in her eyes and she's gone.
Nobody announced it. It was just there in small print for anyone paying close enough attention. And you should know it was Lennon's idea to choose this song, not Elton's. Lennon told him he felt Lucy had been overlooked, that it deserved to be heard by people who didn't already have the album. He wanted to give it another chance.
To a bridge by a fountain, we're rocking.
The single dropped in November 1974. By January 1975, it sat at number 1 in the United States. 2 weeks at the top, 4 weeks at number 1 in Canada. Now, the last part of this story. Lennon had played piano on Elton's solo single, Whatever Gets You Through the Night. Elton told him it would be a number 1. Lennon didn't believe it. He bet against his own record. They agreed. If it hit number 1, Lennon would appear on stage at an Elton John concert. It hit number 1. And on Thanksgiving night 1974 at Madison Square Garden, John Lennon walked out on stage in front of 18,000 people. He played Whatever Gets You Through the Night, then Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, then I Saw Her Standing There. It was the last time John Lennon ever performed in public. He never appeared on another stage again. So the next time you hear Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and those kaleidoscope words drift in, you might be listening to Elton John, and you might not know that somewhere in that recording, the man who wrote it is in there too, playing guitar, singing backup, crediting himself under a name nobody recognized because he didn't want the attention. Giving his own song one more chance. That's one of the most quietly devastating moments in all of rock music, and most people have no idea.